Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for Jinsa's weekly update on Israel at war. I'm Blaise Mishtal, Jinsa's Vice President for Policy. I'm delighted to be joined this week by IDF retired Major General Yaakov Aish, the former head of operations for the IDF General Staff, and Jinsa's Julian and Jenny Josephson, Senior Vice President for Israeli Affairs. Thank you for being with us, General Aish. I thought I'd start by
good to be with you.
I thought I'd start by talking about developments that we've seen in the last week pertaining to Gaza, particularly preparations for the Rafah operation and ongoing negotiations for a potential hostage deal. But then also wanted to chat with you a little bit about what is happening in the north, where we've seen increased attacks over the last several days. I think today we'll probably have a bit of a shorter webinar, given that it is just General Aish with us, but encourage those of you in the audience, if you do have questions for General Aish, to please submit them using the Q&A function in Zoom. So General Aish, could you tell us a little bit about ongoing preparations for the Rafah operation? How is the IDF thinking about this operation, and how is it getting ready for it?
Blaise, again, thank you for having me. Just before I'll start describing the way the IDF prepare himself for the continuation of the war in the south and elsewhere, let me remind our audience that the mission for the IDF is first and foremost to remove the threat of Hamas, in order to allow two things. One is to release the hostages, and the second one is to allow the residents of the south, and I should say also of the north, to be back to their villages. In order to do that, as I said, we have to remove the threat, and in the south is practically speaking dismantling Hamas. And right now we are in a stage where most of Hamas units were dismantled, to exclude 4 battalions in Rafah area along the Philadelphia axis. We should mention the tactical leadership that was eliminated, most of it. However, the higher echelon is still there, with few exceptions. Most of them are hiding under the ground. When we talk about the military infrastructure that Hamas have built in the last 10 years, most of it was dismantled. However, in terms of administrative control in the Gaza Strip, it seems like they have a very effective grip, I would say, on the population, and it seems like they have still good control in that sense. So basically, there is much more to do, and for that, the IDF is preparing himself. And I would say that the IDF is ready. And maybe later we can say a word about the fact that this readiness and this order collides with some other interests, such as the hostages, and not to mention other humanitarian aspects that are on the table. And I'm sure that they were discussed during the visit of Secretary Blinken in the last couple of days.
One of the preconditions or necessary first steps towards a Rafah operation has been described as moving civilians, as many civilians as possible, more than 1 million that are in Rafah, out of the area. I think we've seen reports of increased humanitarian assistance coming into Gaza, of tent cities going up, of new humanitarian zones beyond just the Mawasi being created. Can you tell us a little bit about the humanitarian preparations, and is there a timetable for when those civilian movements might begin?
Okay, I'll start with the humanitarian effort. I think I spoke about it shortly in our last webinar, but basically in terms of humanitarian support and supply, the Gaza Strip is flooded with supply from almost every direction, to include the Erez crossing that was opened yesterday, and the southern Kerem Shalom crossing, and the Rafah crossing, and the U.S. military is preparing also the J-Lot as also an access via the sea for supplies that could have imported into the Gaza Strip, either from Cyprus or elsewhere. So in terms of supply, definitely they are in a much better position. I mentioned the water pipes that Israel have deployed into Gaza. I didn't mention the power grids that were fixed by Israel, and we are supplying electricity to Gaza. And I can continue and mention all the fuel tanks that were imported into Gaza, and all the other trucks with the supply that were provided as well. On top of all of these, we have seen, drops made by, Europeans and Middle Eastern countries, fully coordinated with the IDF, showing their solidarity and the support. So I think that if we will check all in all the situation via the lens of food prices inside the Gaza Strip, we can definitely say that there is no shortage. Prices are more than reasonable, and access is allowed almost to everyone. And those who were taking those goods to the black market have lost a market. Having said that, the mobilization of the population is a different story. There is an effort to prepare certain areas that can later on accommodate those who are going to be mobilized, either from Rafah or from elsewhere. And for that, we have seen already tents deployed in certain areas on the Mawasi that you mentioned, also in Khan Yunis. And we are going to see thousands of those in the next days or weeks that are going to accommodate those who will be mobilized from Rafah. I'm saying will be mobilized because once the order will be given, and we spoke already about the military readiness, we didn't spoke about the operational conditions that can allow an activity in Rafah, but one of them is definitely the mobilization of the population. It's only a matter of time that it will happen, and once it will, we will see the IDF using the same tools that he have used in the northern part of the Gaza Strip, such as leaflets, phone calls, text messages, and many other capabilities in order to not just mobilize and to ask the population to leave their houses, but also where they should go, what should they take, what they are going to get, and all the instructions that should be given from the humanitarian aspects.
At the same time that Israel is undertaking all of these preparations, we have ongoing, I don't know if negotiations is the right word, but ongoing offers constantly being made to Hamas for a hostage deal, new concessions seemingly being made. But on the other hand, we've had Prime Minister Netanyahu say that there's going to be a Rafah operation with or without a deal. I guess, is Israel waiting for a deal? What are your expectations about the reality of reaching an agreement with Hamas at this point?
This is my personal estimation. The fact that the operation in Rafah didn't took place until now have only, to my humble opinion, only one strategic reason, and this is obviously the hostages issue. And the fact that we had this back and forth via the mediators and via the US with the, Hamas about the hostages definitely delayed that. And I'm saying delayed because it's a matter of time and it will happen. in order to conclude the mission in the Gaza Strip, it's quite clear that the hostages has to be released, and later on to finish the mission of dismantling Hamas capabilities. And as I mentioned already, it seems like it's a collision between those two interests, and we are trying to accommodate them via the negotiations and via the help of the US. But it's an interim phase that we have to bear, and the fact that we are here speaking and waiting for Hamas to give an answer is already something that I'm not proud of.
Have we seen any change in the effectiveness of negotiations with Egypt now serving as a mediator, replacing Qatar? Has that had any effect?
I don't know to say if the reason for a change is pressure mounted by the Egyptians or by the US, or is it a matter of new conditions or new offers that are now on the table, or number of hostages that is now on the table. I'm not into all those details. Definitely, there is a momentum right now, definitely compared to last week or 2 weeks ago, but we still have to wait and see. There is a lot of psychological warfare here under and above the table, and we have to bear it in mind.
For the last almost 7 months that the war has been ongoing, Israel's position has been that going forward with the offensive into Gaza is an important part of putting the pressure on Hamas in order to get the hostages back. Could starting a Rafah operation be a source of leverage that might help lead to a deal, as opposed to further waiting for a deal to materialize?
I absolutely agree with that assumption. In fact, I think we are on the verge of such an offense. And when we are studying the level of readiness and the way that the relevant divisions have prepared themselves for the next stage in Rafah, next offensive in Rafah, and the fact that they have finished all the preparation, training, replenishment, and so on and so forth, seems to me like this will be the next stage. It's only a matter of time, either before or after. In order to fulfill the mission given to the IDF, there are only two ways: either to finish the work on Rafah or to change the mission. And this is something that only the political level can do.
Speaking of changing the mission, you had mentioned earlier how readiness being maintained for the operations in Gaza is potentially conflicting with other objectives that Israel might have. Could you tell us a little more about what that means and what those other objectives would be?
Well, we tend to speak in our webinars quite a lot about the situation in Gaza, Hamas, and so on and so forth. And I'm afraid we tend to neglect a bit the other fronts that Israel and the IDF is facing. And the IDF is facing another 7 fronts, obviously Hezbollah in Lebanon, conducting an attrition warfare with the IDF, the militias from the Golan Heights under the sponsorship of Iran, also conducting a kind of an attrition warfare from the Golan Heights, Hamas from the south, the Houthis from Yemen, Hamas supporters and the terror groups inside the Judea and Samaria. We didn't mention yet Iran that joined that war 2 weeks ago, and some other players that are behind the scenes. And I think this is something that so far the IDF and Israel is managing quite well in terms of dealing with several fronts at the same time. But in terms of deterrence, that is a precondition if you want to restore security along our borders. I think we are not yet there. And I think this is something that we will have to face very soon. It's only a matter of time. And when I'm saying to face very soon, it's not only in Gaza. It's not only in Judea and Samaria. It's also, and maybe before everything, with the Hezbollah. It is definitely unacceptable when I'm thinking about the 60,000 Israelis that were uprooted from their houses and villages in the north, that they are already more than 6 months out of their houses, without schools, without a home, living in a hotel in Tiberia or elsewhere. It's unacceptable. When I'm thinking about the day after, I'm asking myself, what are the minimum conditions that will allow these Israelis to be back to their village? And I'm afraid that it leads me to a very unfortunate conclusion that the war in the north is imminent.
So could you tell us a little more, General Aish, about how you think about what those minimum conditions to reestablish security in the north look like? I mean, previously it seemed like Israel's strategy was to push back or to hit Hezbollah militarily to try to push the Radwan forces away from the border and then reach some sort of ceasefire deal mediated potentially by the US or the French. Is that still the strategy? Is that still an option? Because on the one hand, Israel has been operationally very successful against Hezbollah, killing a lot of Radwan operatives and commanders, hitting a lot of Hezbollah sites, but the attacks keep coming. So does that require a change of strategy at this point?
Well, I would add to your description that what Israel was doing, strategy was sequencing Hezbollah after Hamas. And that's why I think once we'll conclude the mission with the Hamas, it will be a matter of time that we will have to address the threat. Definitely, the Northern Command is doing a very good job so far, according to the mission given to him, to defend along the Israeli border from every attack. And it seems to me like they are doing a very good job. And we have inflicted severe damage on Hezbollah military infrastructure all over Lebanon, not only in the southern part of Lebanon. And we have created severe damage to their military infrastructure, to include the hundreds of their operatives that were killed by us in a very surgical way. But with that, you don't win a war. That's why we can see that the attrition war between us and Hezbollah continue, and they can continue to show solidarity with the Hamas. I'm afraid that in order to allow Israelis to be back to their village, to continue to cultivate their fields until the last inch, until the blue line, which is the border acknowledged by the UN after the withdrawal from Lebanon, Israel withdrawal from Lebanon in May 2000, we will have to remove Hezbollah threat from the southern part. There are two ways to do it. One is political. I'm afraid that 1701 was proved like a very poor resolution when it comes to the sense of how it was applied on the ground. And the other option is a military option. And it's a matter of time, as I said. It's a very unfortunate, but it seems to me like it's there to come.
How about on the Iranian front? It's been now almost 2 weeks since the Israeli response to Iran's attack on Israel. Does it seem like some sort of deterrence or equilibrium has been established, or do you think that there is still more direct Iranian attacks to come against Israel?
When you are saying equilibrium, if you are thinking about it in a bilateral way, you are absolutely right. However, I tend to look at it in a comprehensive perspective. And I think if we want to analyze the situation, we have to consider the performance of what had happened 2 weeks ago, including a retaliation by someone towards that activity by watching very carefully what Hezbollah is doing. And it seems like Hezbollah is doing the same he did before the Iranian attack have occurred. And in that sense, I think we are not on the same place. Something significant had happened. You know, Iran decided explicitly to attack Israel, and I think that it will take time and many strategic moves if we will if we want to restore that equilibrium or deterrence that exists until 2 weeks ago. It will take time, and the key factor here is Hezbollah. Going back always to Hezbollah, due to the fact that Hezbollah is something that was built, equipped, trained, funded, managed, sponsored by Iran, and still is. And the supreme leader in Iran is deciding on the activity of that organization. And the linkage is very clear. And definitely, it creates a certain level or a certain deterrence that deter Israelis from living in their villages along the border. And that's why I'm afraid we'll have to address it in a severe way. And it won't, it's not possible to continue the way we are doing it. You can't win a war via attrition.
Just to pick up on something that you said there, General Aish, uh, do you, on the level of coordination or direction from Tehran to Hezbollah, do you see sort of Iranian commands to maintain a certain level of violence and attacks against Israel, or is it more general as to say, stay in the fight, or is it even more specific and say, you should be attacking this much? What is that level of coordination like?
Let's say it in a different word. If the supreme leader would like a ceasefire, between Hezbollah and us, all you have to do is to instruct Nasrallah. And it seems to me that this kind of order was not given. On the contrary, when you are looking at what have happened via the Syrian channel, what kind of support was mobilized from Iran via that channel to Hezbollah, you can understand that the green light for this kind of attrition was given, was allowed as part of the support that the radical axis is given to Hamas.
Given this challenge in the north and the need that you've discussed, General Aish, for Israel to pivot its resources and attention from Gaza to the north at some point, how quickly can the IDF do that, and what sort of operational tempo can the IDF sustain at this point? Now, almost 7 months into this conflict, with a high number of reserve mobilizations, is how much time would be needed to prepare for dealing with the north?
It's a matter of decision, obviously, of the Israeli government. And once it will be given, it can be done very fast. The readiness is very high. Obviously, the deployment right now along the north is a defensive deployment with the very high, I would say, air offensive capabilities, high readiness. But it can be transformed into offense very fast.
All right, well, let me encourage our audience, if they have any questions, to submit them through the Q&A. Let me ask one from Terry Gardner. Is there or will there likely be a refugee camp in Sinai?
I think as far it depends on us, we are not pushing the Palestinians towards Sinai. I would say the contrary. It's quite clear that what we do when it comes to Egypt and the border of Egypt with Rafah and the Palestinian side, we are very sensitive to it. I can add on that the level of, I would say, military coordination between us and Egypt is very high, and we will try to avoid this type of development. It's really up to the Egyptians if they want to host the Palestinians on their own side. They are sovereign on Sinai, and they can open the Rafah passage to Palestinians to come in. But so far, it seems like they are not considering it. As long as they don't pursue it, definitely we don't.
And related to this question of coordination with Egypt, Mindy Stein asks, there are 38 tunnels from Rafah to Egypt. Does Israel know if the tunnels leading into Rafah through the Philadelphia corridor are still open for Hamas to smuggle weapons from Egypt?
Well, there are tunnels, and there were tunnels in the past. Most of them were sealed by the Egyptians. There are different kind of tunnels. I won't go into it, but as far as we know, we are using our own measures in order to deal with that. And when I'm saying measures, it could be either kinetic, direct measures, and there are those that can be dealt via diplomatic channels and coordination channels. All of those sensitive channels are used. One of the key reasons for us to go into Rafah and to dismantle the four Hamas battalions is not only the fact that we want to finish the mission of dismantling Hamas, it's also to cut the lines of supplies that were feeding Hamas during the years via those tunnels. By the way, not only via those tunnels, quite a lot of the stuff that came into Gaza came above the tunnel via bribery and trucks and UNRWA and some other platforms that were used by Hamas.
Has there been any agreement with Egypt about putting in place an underground barrier, the same sort of protective system that's on the Israel-Gaza border along the Philadelphia corridor after the war?
Not that I know. I'm not sure if it was agreed yet. Definitely, it could be part of a permanent solution, a part of a permanent solution. The range that you have to cover is significantly short compared to what we have built along the Gaza Strip, and it seems it was effective to the extent that it prevented the tunnels from penetrating the border. However, without someone controlling it, dealing with the different attempts and attacking those who are trying to sneak behind the barrier, it will be useless. So it's not only a matter of barrier, it's also a matter of who is controlling it, inspecting it, defending it, and reacting to all type of attempts when they come.
On the topic of the Hamas negotiations, do you have any sense that the protests across the U.S. and other countries are emboldening Hamas to hold out with negotiations or affecting whether there is a deal or not?
I think a lot of things affected the Hamas, and the fact that Hamas is taking the time in answering the different proposals that were made is proof for that. To what extent what is going on in universities in the States is affecting it, I'm not sure. I'm the one to be asked. But everything, is very clear and very transparent to them, to include the voices that they can hear here in the US, in Europe, or elsewhere.
Turning to the north, do you know if, as part of IDF planning, there'd be any attempts to create or help mobilize civilians to evacuate Lebanese villages in the south ahead of an Israeli operation?
I don't want to go into operational details. What I can say about that is that around 90,000 Lebanese have evacuated themselves already from the southern part of Lebanon.
Do you know out of roughly how many that live in that area?
Out of 200,000.
Okay. Do you have any sense of how much domestic Lebanese politics plays into Hezbollah and Nasrallah's decision making? Could there be pressure internally that convinces him to stop the attacks, or is it purely up to a command from Tehran?
I've mentioned already the fact that 90,000 Lebanese have evacuated themselves from the southern part of Lebanon, and it's something that have happened in the last 6 months, and it have happened without us mobilizing them, and with us attacking in a very surgical, in a very accurate way only Hezbollah targets. So I would say that at least in the last 6 months, it doesn't have a significant effect on the decision-making of Hezbollah. They have their own strategic goals. They have their own guidance from Nasrallah and from the supreme leader in Iran. The linkage is quite clear, and that's what they consider. This is their priority. And the rest is something that they don't care too much. Take a look at the economy in Lebanon. Take a look at the time that Lebanese have electricity in Lebanon. It's less than Gaza. So I think it's not a significant factor when it comes to decision-making in Hezbollah.
A question from Jack Krapf. How is the morale of the IDF forces? Are they ready to finish the fight in Gaza as well as the north if needed? And with the additional supplemental funding approved by Congress and signed by the president last week, does the IDF have the resources to continue fighting if total war in the north happens?
Well, I'll start with the morale, and it's not only the soldiers. I would say, today I was listening to mothers that were talking about the necessity of the IDF to finish and to complete its mission in the south. It was pretty impressive and moving. And, the Holocaust Memorial Day is in Sunday evening. Over here in Israel, and the linkage is very clear to every Israeli soldier and every Israeli citizens. If we want to live safely and peacefully over here in this country, the only way is to defend it. And this is their turn, their mission. And so far, they have proven that they are committed above every imagination. It's already 6 months. There are units that fought inside Gaza without any break for 5 months. It was unbelievable, and they insisted to stay there. And when they went out, they went for replenishment, refresh a bit, prepare themselves for the next mission, either north or south. So when it comes to motivation, it's very clear. Everything is very vivid, especially after what have happened in October 7th.
And our final question from Jonathan Nemeth. What is the Biden administration's plan for Gaza if it doesn't want Israel to enter Rafah? Or I guess asked another ways, has there been an agreement with the U.S. on an operational plan for Rafah, or is it still being disputed between the two partners?
I'm not into those details, and definitely I'm not into the details of the U.S. Planning. What I can say is that when it comes to the humanitarian support, the U.S. is heavily involved in that, and you can see it via the JLOT attempt and all the other shipments provided as a humanitarian support to the Gaza Strip. Regarding the other stuff, I'm not into it. You were mentioning the U.S. Support, and I think it's a good time to say thank you and how appreciative we are for that important, very important support. And it's not only the decision that Congress just made a few days ago. I'm talking about the military support Israel got from day one. I'm talking about numerous shipments that were made to Israel of all type of stuff and things that helped us to be better ready in order to fulfill our mission. But I think the culmination of it is the decision that Congress made and the president have authorized and signed lately, which is very significant, definitely in terms of air and missile defense. Arrow, David Sling, and Iron Dome that have proven themselves as a very effective system during the whole war and during the attack coming from Iran. But there are many other elements that are going to be supported via that important budget. And I know that there is already a negotiation about the next stages. The IDF will have to reform itself after this war and rebuild itself and to adjust due to the new challenges that we are facing. I mentioned already the 7 fronts, but we have to make sure that we are preparing ourselves for future wars, not previous wars. And I think in that sense, the U.S. Support is vital. And as I said, very much appreciated all over Israel.
Well, thank you for that, General Eish. Let me use that as an opportunity to point out that the big supplemental bill that Congress passed last week contained not just money to aid Israel's defense and Ukraine, Taiwan, and others, but also a package of almost 20 additional measures, including many new sanctions on Iran that JINSA had recommended. You can check out everything that was included in that bill, an excellent write-up that we have on our website at jinsa.org, as well as all of our other analysis. I would also commend to you an op-ed that just came out today from a number of our generals and admirals programs participants advocating and explaining the importance of Israel finishing the Rafah operation. You can find those on our website at jinsa.org. General Eish, thank you so much for your time this evening. To all of you who tuned in, thank you for joining us. Have a good afternoon. Look forward to seeing you next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Blaise. Thank you all.